So now I'd like the catechumens here this morning to know that, are you checking the time? Right. That's what you get. Somebody checks the time when I come down here. But just to let the catechumens know that we have a sense of humor before we have a very brief little comment on the gospel. Have you noticed how often Jesus was into food and so on? And there's a little story about a dietitian was giving a lecture to a large crowd on food and what to eat and what not to eat, and he began off by saying red meat is very bad for you, and drinking a lot of soda full of sugar can cause all kinds of things, and certain vegetables, he said, are absolutely disastrous, really have long-term effects, and even drinking water, he said, you've got to be very careful what kind of water you drink. But there's one food, he said, and we all have, most of us here have probably had it, and some of us will probably have it in future, and it has long-term effects, and it can cause you problems for the rest of your life, and it can be very, very dangerous. So think carefully before you ever touch it. Does anybody know what food I'm talking about? Well, and a little old man in the front seat got up and said, "Wedding cake." Wedding cake. You're winking at me. Now, I just want to, there's so many things we could talk about in the gospel this morning, but we'll focus on one thing. I just want, by way of preface, you got to remember the gospels were written long after Christ had been and Christ died and rose and so on, and they were written for each of the evangelists wrote the gospel for the people of their time, for their community. So it's always at the moment, it's for all of us here what we can take from the gospel, because that's the idea the evangelists had for the people listening to it at this moment. And so we have the lovely meeting of Peter and Jesus. Now, I want you just, in your own mind for a moment, imagine you're Peter, and very recently you have let Christ down, Jesus down, in a very big way. At his most weakest and vulnerable and needful moment, Peter is very aware. When John said, "It is the Lord," suddenly Peter was back at warming himself at that fire when he denied Christ 3 times. So can you imagine how he felt? Can you imagine how he felt? Very embarrassed, wondering what kind of reception he was going to get from Jesus when he saw Jesus standing there. You just pause for a moment and think about that. You have a very good friend, and some day comes and he really needs you or she really needs you, and when you're asked at that time, you even deny that you even know them, and you want nothing to do with somebody who thought you were their best friend. And then one day you walk in somewhere and there is that person. How would you feel? You'd feel pretty, wouldn't you? Tongue-tied. You'd probably go red in the face. You'd feel pretty embarrassed. And so take that along with you, and then come, and there's Peter now in the company of the other apostles and Jesus, and he's cooking a meal for them, and he actually hands them the food. This same person that Christ denied, that Peter denied 3 times, is now actually cooking food for him and handing him food and serving him. And can Peter look him in the eye? I wonder. Could I look Jesus in the eye if I'd done that? Could I look my best friend in the eye if I had let them down in their moment of most need? I don't think I could. And then Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? Now, this is where we have a problem, because the gospel we read today and the words we read are a translation from the Greek and probably from Aramaic and Hebrew, and they've lost a lot of their meaning in the translation because we use the word love 3 times. But in Greek, there were at least 3 different names for love. There was eros, there was philia, and there was agape. And so when Jesus asked Peter 3 times, he used different Greek words. Not the word eros, but the word philia and agape. Philia and agape. And so it's a bit like Jesus saying to Peter, are you my friend? Are you my friend? Rather than saying, you are my friend. Are you my friend? Put it a different way. Jesus wasn't just saying to Peter, Peter, do you love me more than anybody else? But he was also in the agape saying to Peter, do you believe that I love you unconditionally? No conditions, no ifs, not a contract, a covenant. Do you believe, Peter, do you believe that I am your friend? Now that's why Peter hesitated. He says, Lord, you know I love you. Yes, Peter, I know. But do you believe that I am your friend? So can you see the total forgiveness there of Peter? Do you believe that I am still your friend and that I love you unconditionally? Now that's the kind of love often we're talking between husband and wife. Unconditional, beautiful love that's similar to God's love for us. So what's the message for us here this morning? The message is God never stops loving us. We sometimes walk away. We sometimes let him down. We're human. And you see how Jesus totally accepted Peter's humanity. So the real question was, Peter, do you still believe that I am your friend, that I love you, which is more important than my love for God? And finally, Peter realized and said, yes, Lord, you know I do. Because that was the same Peter that had said, even if everybody else let you down, I will never let you down, even if it means dying with you. So you can imagine how Peter felt. He needed to be, he needed to hear those words of Christ. And what was the result? He was back. he was given the top job, and he went forward, and he stood up before people, and he had courage, and he had his self-confidence back. And I think I have been there in that position many, many times, almost afraid to approach God. But today I realize I need never be afraid. And that's the lovely message from the gospel this morning. Never be afraid to come to Christ. He loves you. Thanks.